Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar. I'm Hamish and I'm the CEO at Cisema. I'm a lawyer by training, admitted in New South Wales, Australia, and Hong Kong, which has been my home for over 7 years. I was formerly with UK Magic Circle firm Linklaters. And thank you for your attention today.
I'm Jacky and I've joined Cisema since 2019. I've studied my bachelor's in Canada and previously worked in Peru Veritas that specialized in testing, inspection, and certification. Currently, I'm the project lead to support our Hong Kong registration projects as well as medical device listing applications.
Okay, and thank you for joining us today. We are going to talk for around 30 minutes. It's just a bite-sized webinar just to give you a brief recap about Hong Kong listing and registration of pharma and medical device products. And we're also going to touch on the latest GBA pathways and updates as well. Questions will be addressed more broadly at the end, but we'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So if anything comes to you during the webinar, please jot it into the chat box and we'll do our best to cover it. If you'd like a copy of the slides, please email Jacky or I after the session. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about pharmaceutical registration for Hong Kong. We're going to talk about medical device and IVD listing and the process, the regulator, in a brief recap, and overall trends and approvals, as well as the latest GBA updates. That includes what does GBA, Greater Bay Area of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Macau, Guangdong mean, and how might it be interesting to you as a pharma or medical device manufacturer. Okay, let's begin. So first we start with a quick overview of the organization structure of the primary regulator for drugs and medical device in Hong Kong. This is now known as the Health Bureau, previously the Food and Health Bureau, as of July 2022, last year. There's only one department, which is the Department of Health, under the Health Bureau, responsible for overseeing the safety and efficacy of medical products marketed in Hong Kong. The Drug Office was established in 2011, and it's responsible for drug registration, specifically. The Medical Device Control Office, or MDCO, was established in 2004, but then renamed the Medical Device Division, or MDD, in 2019. It's responsible for implementing the MDACS, the Medical Device Administration Control System, which features the voluntary listing system for medical devices and IVDs in Hong Kong. You can see also on the slide we just set out the Hospital Authority, or HA, in Hong Kong. It's the statutory body managing all the government hospitals and institutions, medical institutions in Hong Kong. Both the DOH, the Department of Health, and the HA, the Hospital Authority, are responsible to the Health Bureau. The reason for mentioning the Health Authority, or Hospital Authority, excuse me, is because they're responsible for purchase of pharmaceutical and medical device for Hong Kong public hospitals. And it's only once such HA purchases are made that GBA pathways become available.
So on the next slide, according to the laws of Hong Kong, pharmaceutical products must be registered prior to their sale in the market to ensure that these medicines are safe, effective, and also of good quality. It is necessary for the protection of the general public's health. You might be committing an offense for selling unregistered pharmaceutical product in Hong Kong. So for the purpose of registration, manufacturers will also be required to provide documents of the product to support its safety, efficacy, and quality. The documents usually required are the manufacturing and quality control procedure, the clinical study reports, and overseas post-marketing study results of the product. In this slide, like up above, we've provided a reference link to the Hong Kong Drug Office's official website, where a list of guidance notes are available. Each guidance note outlines the general requirements for registration of pharmaceutical products and should be read in conjunction with the current laws governing pharmaceutical products in Hong Kong. Set out in the yellow box are the ordinances and the relevant subsidiary legislation to governing pharmaceutical products.
So if you're interested, there's some information to read more. We won't go into the full detail about it, but we're going to provide a further overview in the following slides.
Right. So just to look into it closer, before the submission of the drug registration application, the applicant should already have a good idea of whether the drug product is generic or containing a new chemical or biological entity, or whether it's a biosimilar product, and whether the pharmaceutical product is an ATP, advanced therapy product in Hong Kong. Set out in the slide are the scope of NCEs and ATPs. After receiving the application submission, the drug office will review and consider whether the application for registration is subjected to the classification requirements on a case-by-case basis. But applicants are highly recommended to refer to these specific guidance notes on the drug office's website if they're unsure about the classification.
So it's worth just saying that Hong Kong is generally guided by the home country jurisdiction approvals, and in general, you need your home country approvals before you apply for Hong Kong. And so the pathways you've taken in home country, US or Japan or EU will guide how this categorization works, but there may be subtle differences and definitional subtleties. So that's why we provided some further detail here. The dossier format is based on the ICH CTD, and may also find applicants may find the process to be a lot more straightforward because it is just document-based. The existing information of your module 2 to 5 can be effectively used again for the Hong Kong submission. The submission requirements are slightly different depending on the classification of the pharmaceutical product. For instance, one free sales certificate, FSC, or certificate of a pharmaceutical product, your CPP, will be sufficient for Hong Kong registration dossiers as a general matter. But if it's an NCE application, then 2 CPPs will be required. Something to think about. This shows the importance for applicants to determine the product classification early in the process of your registration, and of course refer to the specific requirements in the official guidance notes. In the yellow box, we've listed out the specific countries recognized by the Hong Kong Drug Office for registration approvals, whilst applicants should also keep in mind it's mandatory to submit at least one FSC or CPP certificate issued from the product's country of origin by the respective official regulatory body.
If the pharmaceutical product is manufactured outside Hong Kong, the person responsible for obtaining registration is a licensed wholesale dealer who imported the pharmaceutical product, or it could also be the Hong Kong branch, subsidiary, representative, agent, or distributor of the overseas manufacturer. Normally, it takes at least 1 month to set up the online account and also fill in the application, as well as to collect the required documents for submission, including the arrangement of ordering the certified true copies of the CPPs, FSCs, as Hamish has mentioned, and as well as the GMP certificates, because it will take time to ship to Hong Kong. Once the online application is submitted, an acknowledgement notice will be issued right away via the Hong Kong Drug Office's online platform, and the applicant will wait for the screening officer's further instructions to provide supplementary information for the application, or proceed to submit the application fee along with the hard copies of the certificates and modules 2 to 5 in CD or DVD format. The application fee is 1,100 Hong Kong dollars upfront and non-refundable even if the approval is not granted. Another payment to be aware of is the registration fee of 1,370 Hong Kong dollars following the approval granted by the drug office. Upon confirmation from the drug office that the screening process is completed, the applicants can expect to receive the registration approval results within 5 to 6 months. The registration certificate itself is valid for 5 years, but can be renewed for 575 Hong Kong dollars. For change of registered particulars, such as the change of name or address of the registration certificate holder, it will cost 155 Hong Kong dollars and take up to 6 months to complete this application.
Yeah, and this timeline is a realistic best case scenario. What can delay the process is the ongoing information request from the drug office for additional information. And so it's important to try to ensure that your dossier is as complete as possible in the first submission, as with any global submission. So now we're going to move to medical device and IVD. The current administrative control system for medical devices and IVDs is called the MDACS, MDACS, Medical Device Administration Control System. It is a voluntary system. So Hong Kong importation of medical device and IVDs currently is not, there's no registration or listing required. You can start selling tomorrow. But there are reasons that you may want to voluntarily list. One of those is that it may well become mandatory in the future, and that has been hinted at by the government. Although it's worth saying that it's been hinted for 15 or 20 years, and it hasn't happened yet. So it could change soon, or it could take another 15 or 20 years for mandatory listing of Hong Kong medical device and IVDs prior to sale into Hong Kong. The first step is classification. If you do want to voluntarily list your device or IVD, the classification process and rules largely follow the IMDRF guidelines. There are 4 broad categories of devices and IVDs with various sub-rules to review and analyze and apply to your product.
So on the Hong Kong Medical Device Division website, there is a free online tool that allows website visitors to check the likely risk class of their product in Hong Kong. But of course, the final decision will be up to the Hong Kong MDD when they receive and review the application closely. Applicants might find this tool useful before the application because, as Hamish mentioned about the risk classification, currently in Hong Kong, only medium to high risk medical devices and IVDs can be listed on the Hong Kong MDAX system, which means that Class 1 medical devices and Class A IVDs won't be able to apply for a listing.
And here's the link to the online tool on the MDAX website.
In this slide, we've provided a breakdown of the application particulars for MDAX listing. If you refer to the particulars of the device in the table, the conformity assessment certificates is optional for some cases when the applicant's market approval certificate does not meet the MDAX requirement. Although a lot of companies assume that having CE or FDA approval means automatically being accepted for Hong Kong listing, there can be quite a lot of additional information requested by the MDD. The benefits of appointing a regulatory affairs specialist as your LRP, which includes collecting required documents for dossier submission, handling post-market matters, and maintaining effective communication with the manufacturer, the government official, and other related parties. Here in this slide, I would also like to share some practical tips from common problems that we've experienced before with our clients for their listing applications. The Hong Kong Medical Device Division can be quite strict with the contact information details stated on the documents, such as the manufacturer's address. Certificates like the ISO 13485 and other foreign market approval certificates will have the manufacturer's address printed on it, but these may not always be up to date. For example, if the manufacturer is relocated to a different address, but still be waiting for the certificate issuing body to provide the certificate with the updated information. It is the applicant's responsibility to ensure that all the required documents for the dossier submission are up to date. Otherwise, additional processing time might occur. In the next slide, we will dive in further to talk about the timeline, application procedures, and items to know.
So here's an overview of the timeline for the listing application. The first stage is a document collection process. There's the preliminary matters about the local responsible person appointment, the application dossier and form itself, which is then submitted following, thereafter you obtain an application number. There's then a preliminary check by the MDAX system, an administrative check to ensure the documentation is complete. Then you will most likely receive a supplementary request or information notice from the MDD that asks for additional information. After you've responded to this, there's a more detailed review again by the division and medical device division, and then there's another completeness check as well as the submission. Then you go down and may have further rounds of information requests depending on the dossier and the product, and if it's a higher risk or more complex or complicated product, the MDD really can take their time to try to understand the product and ensure that it's appropriately classified and safe and effective. After the other further reviews by MDAX are completed, the dossier will then be submitted by the reviewer to the meeting board of MDAX, and following approval of which it will be listed on the MDAX database, which is publicly available. And the basic information will be available on that database. There's no application fee charged for MDD listings. However, manufacturers and applicants should expect the cost of appointing the local responsible person, as well as, of course, the dossier preparation, regulatory communications and meetings, times, and support, as well as ongoing advice and support. Just a reminder that Class 1 products are not eligible to list. So you cannot list such products even if you would like to on the MDAX database of your medical device or IVD. You must have a local entity in Hong Kong who's the responsible person who actually makes the submission, and there's minimum processing times. In our experience, the process takes 6 to 12 months, really depending on that extra review time by the MDD, and they have been quite overloaded at the moment, so it can take some months or weeks or months for reviews and further questions to come through. The validity is 5 years for the listing certificate. Okay, we're going to shift gears now. We've looked at, just in brief overview, the pharmaceutical registration. We've looked in brief overview at the IVD and medical device listing. And so, what does this mean apart from being able to sell into, of course, the Hong Kong market? What's interesting is there's been a policy push from both the mainland China government as well as Hong Kong government for an integration of the Greater Bay Area, which is a region, of some 70 million people. And we've just got some stats here on the slide to give an indication of the market size. Hong Kong has a population of 7.5 million. Switzerland, by comparison, has a similar number of people. The Greater Bay Area, which includes Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, Guangdong, and this region has around 78, nearly 80 million people, which is larger than the UK and almost as large as Germany. There is around 43 facilities, public hospitals in Hong Kong with 30,000 beds, and 13 hospitals with over 5,000 beds. As of a few days ago, there are 12,500 pharmaceutical products registered in Hong Kong, 106 of which were registered in the first quarter. There are over 4,500 medical devices listed in MDAX as of a few days ago.
The official announcement about the Hong Kong Greater Bay Area integration dates back to November 6th of 2019. The Hong Kong government issued a press release welcoming the 16 policy measures introduced by the central government of China for permitting the use of Hong Kong registered drugs and common medical devices from designated Hong Kong-owned healthcare institutions to the China Greater Bay Area. In September 2020, it was announced that the University of Hong Kong Shenzhen Hospital will be the first institution in the GBA to use Hong Kong registered drugs and common medical devices on a pilot basis. So the pilot plan ran between January and July of 2021, and as of February 2023, 23 drugs and 13 medical devices have been approved by the Guangdong MPA as originally needed for clinical use. And recently in February 2023, also in February 2023, the Guangdong MPA announced the addition of 14 designated GBA medical institutions, bringing a total of 19 Hong Kong-owned institutions that can support this Hong Kong GBA integration.
So here's the list of the 5 GBA medical institutions designated under GBA. Yeah, Jacky, maybe you can go through it.
Right. These are the 5 on the left. You can see the 5 GBA medical institutions who are designated under the Hong Kong GBA pathway to make applications to the Guangdong MPA. The Guangdong MPA is responsible for approving imports of medical devices and IVDs from Hong Kong to the Greater Bay Area. And then another 27 Hong Kong-owned healthcare institutions in the GBA were identified in 2019. This shows potential for the upcoming, like what we can expect to be added to the designated list in future.
And yes, on the right-hand side of the slide is the 14 new institutions that were added in just February of this year, bringing the total to 19. And here's just a very brief overview map about Hong Kong is listed or is marked kind of in the bottom middle, and you also have Guangzhou and then the broader Bay Area.
So more recently, on April 23rd, just a few days ago, the Guangdong MPA announced the 4th batch of medical products that are urgently imported via the GBA pathway. So 3 of them are pharmaceutical products and 1 of them are medical devices, as you can see in the table in the slide.
So we thought this may be interesting just to see that there are continuing to be products that are approved as urgently needed in the GBA. These are products that have not been approved by the China's NMPA, either medical device or pharma product, but they have been sold in Hong Kong or listed and approved in Hong Kong as well. And they have now made a submission, which will be an accelerated submission to Guangzhou MPA, the GBA responsible regulator, which allows them to be sold into Hong Kong hospitals, Hong Kong-owned institutions in the GBA itself, which is an exciting development and opportunity for those medical device and IVD and pharma companies that don't yet have product approvals. So just set here what the broad process looks like. There are prerequisites of having your registration or listing in Hong Kong first. Then you need to submit your application together with the relevant GBA medical institution that's approved of the 19 that we referred to earlier to the Guangdong MPA. And the important point here is that the application itself is in fact made by the medical institution, by the hospital. So you first need to ensure that you have the connection with the hospital and their willingness and interest to purchase the product and to use the product in the hospital because they deem it needed for use and for sale in the institution itself. So once you work with the hospital to make this submission, the application will then be reviewed and approved by the Guangdong MPA with a quite short and fast turnaround time of 5 working days with the relevant task force before there's a further 15 working day approval time. Officially, the approval time is 35 working days for such approval once submission is made by the hospital to the Guangdong NPA. Here are some of the factors relevant for selection. For pharmaceuticals, it should be urgently needed for clinical use. It should already be procured and operating in public hospitals in Hong Kong or Macau. It should not be considered to fall under the relevant permit management of anabolic agents, peptide hormones, or other specific products in the in certain drugs categories. For medical devices, the factors are whether it's urgently needed for clinical use, whether it is already procured and operating in a public hospital in Hong Kong or Macau, and whether it has advanced technology in its clinical application. This doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be state-of-the-art or unique, but it does need to show some innovative applications in use. So that is an important factor to be aware of. And why might you choose this pathway?
So apart from the overall landscape of Hong Kong being heavily reliant on imports for all manners of goods, Hong Kong is also a medical products and equipment sourcing base for mainland China and other destinations. As mentioned, it is also a requirement of the hospital authority to have the product listed in Hong Kong for public hospital tenders. The hospital authority is a statutory body managing all the government hospitals and institutes in Hong Kong. It is also a requirement for the Hong Kong owned and designated medical institution in the Greater Bay Area.
Yeah, we've just set a few points on the slide here about some other reasons that might be interesting to start in Hong Kong before you go to the GBA area. Because of, you can start with sales, you can start to generate sales before you make the expensive China NMPA mainland application, which has substantial filing fees. It may also have clinical trial requirements in China, which you don't have the data for. It can allow you also to gather such Chinese ethnic data, for example, that you may not have in a real-world setting in GBA hospitals that can then support your China-wide application. So what might that process look like to full China-wide approval? Just thought we'd leave you this slide, which suggests the pathway. You start with your approval of listing in Hong Kong. You then locate a relevant GBA-approved institution that is interested and willing to support your application to GBA pathway. The GBA makes the approval for the product to be sold into the GBA hospitals. Then you need to make a separate submission, which you can do in parallel, for NMPA, real-world data collection approval. The NMPA will then approve your study, following which you can collect and use this data for the purposes of your China NMPA application. So that's something of interest for companies which may want to have a staged approach with a particular product type for the China NMPA market. There are some, this is still not fully proven pathway, but it is interesting. There are uncertainties relating to, first of all, finding the GBA hospital who will support your product application in GBA, and also the real-world data collection point. Real-world data is not alone enough to avoid a clinical trial in China, but it can be strongly supportive if you have sufficient other clinical data. So there's just some considerations. And with that, that's our 30 minutes up. And we've just set out some last points about us more generally. I won't spend time going through this more now. We are a regulatory affairs consultancy supporting for Hong Kong and for mainland China with 20 years experience. And here's some more points about us on the slide. Right, I think time is up anyway. One or two questions upcoming, but yes, I don't want to take up more of your time, so we'll finish now. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, please reach out. Thank you. Bye-bye.